So we'll do an introduction of the CAG members. We will do a brief project overview of, sorry, let me just put this here so we're not staring at the. All right, a brief project overview. We will discuss the public involvement review throughout the process that we've done. We'll also take a look at the alternatives analysis review and review the top performing alternative. We'll discuss any funding opportunities that we've been looking for the project, and then we'll have a final discussion, sort of question and answer, and we'll follow up with what are the next steps for the project. So introductions. The people that are comprised of this CAG meeting are municipalities. They are Chamber of Commerce. They're, as the mayor has suggested, sort of a broad region of players, and we are happy to be a part of that. So here is the project team. We've been very supported by the Village of Elmwood Park and IDOT, Metra, obviously CP and Cook County. Thank you for your representation. These others are the members who are of the project team who are supporting the project as well. And the CAG members themselves, we have obviously a great showing for transportation agencies and organizations, and we have a great list of Wyden Township and other surrounding communities that are helping us. CMAP is here, Metra, other agencies that are focused on this project, and we appreciate all of the help. So what are the CAG goals? The CAG goals are to actively seek participation from all of the members. Obviously, be respectful to review all concerns and considerations. We ask you to provide input. You are sort of our eyes and our ears to the local communities, to the local issues and concerns that are raised with your constituents. So we've asked you here to help us with some of those. You're also critical to help ensure that the information is developed correctly within the project team, and to also provide information on the study team with regards to economics, transportation, any key local resources that you might have. And you've helped us to understand some of those issues that we've been facing. So I'm going to hand it over to Scott, and he is going to do the project overview.
Thanks, Ellie. Yes, we're just going to go through a brief project overview. A lot of you have attended previous CAG meetings. It's been a while. Some of you may have not been in attendance, so just want to provide a brief refresher of where we've been and where we're going. Here's our project area map. Basically the crossing, Grand Avenue, the Metro Canadian Pacific Railway crossing is about 0.6 miles west of Harlem Avenue in the Village of Elmwood Park. The total limits are about half a mile, pretty much a quarter mile on each side of the crossing. It also includes several minor cross streets that you see there that are included within the project area, most notably 76th Avenue right here. That will also be impacted. You know, that's a major roadway that leads into the Conti Parkway Circle where we are located right now. So as I mentioned, we're going to Ellie will take us back going through a brief history of what's occurred previously and where we're headed.
Okay, so as you can tell, we're in the last third of our phase one study timeline, and after this meeting, we'll be looking to hold a public hearing And that public hearing will showcase the analysis, and it will highlight the top performing alternative that we have been focused on. This is also the last chance for the public to have any questions or comments answered, and the last chance for the design team to finalize their design before they submit it for design approval, and that we're looking for will be late 2024. So we're currently in phase 1 of the project, and we tentatively look to complete this phase in December of 2024 and move on to phase 2, which we're looking to complete in 2026. And it's important to note that we've been doing a pretty extensive public engagement process throughout this. Let's see here.
It's
All
still on
right.
the computer, so.
Oh, did it? Okay. Well, it's on the computer. That's helpful.
It's the projector.
The projector.
Projector just turn on.
See.
They can't plan for a projector turn, so.
See, these are the fun things that we miss while, on Zoom, right?
Already.
We started. All right, well, if anybody wants a bagel, coffee, time to grab it.
There you go.
Thank you. All right, so public involvement. So let's review kind of where we've been and where we're gonna go. So we had the first CAG meeting, which was held virtually on July 23rd, 2020. And this was really the start of the meeting of the project. So we reviewed goals and guidelines, we reviewed the project overview, project objectives, we looked at the timeline, and we talked about the project benefits. And some of the discussion items that we also discussed were some of the items that the mayor brought up, issues of safety, concern, challenges, pedestrian safety, traffic delays. Those were the key elements that people were bringing up. So with that, we held a second CAG meeting in February of 2021. This was at the point where we developed the draft problem statement, the draft purpose and need. We also focused on the criteria for the alternative analysis. How are we going to define some of those analysis? And then with the workshop, we did a breakout workshop, and that was focused on looking at that criteria. So how are we defining that criteria? How are we weighting that criteria? And at this meeting, we also did sort of a preview for the CAG of what the public information meeting number 1 was going to be. And that public information meeting number 1 was held in April of 2021. Due to COVID, it was held virtually, and we had 88 participants. And this was the first meeting that the public was exposed to this project. So we really focused on the overview, the PEL study, focus on what the draft problem statement was. And the purpose and need statement. There was also some breakout sessions to discuss some of the key themes. And those key themes were echoed from the first CAG meeting. So issues of safety for pedestrians, emergency vehicles, passenger vehicles. And then from the public's perspective, we had reduction of noise was also a key issue, the impacts on homes and businesses, and just looking at the project timeline overall. From there, we had our third CAG meeting, and that was held in December of 2021. And this was really focused on looking at the 6 alternatives that were developed and understanding how those ranked with the criteria and the weight of importance that was already discussed and evaluated during that second CAG meeting. So this was looked at a little bit further of how those 6 alternatives stacked up. And then we also prepped the CAG for the second public meeting. And that second public meeting was held in person in May, excuse me, of last year. And we had 87 participants. And as you can tell, we held it in person. And we also had a Spanish translator to help us if anyone was needing that service. So the second public meeting was to really focus on those 6 alternatives, to have the public look at them and review them. We also discussed the scheduled timeline and some of those issues, but yeah, I will now turn it over to Scott, who will talk a little bit more in depth about that alternative review.
Thank you. Okay, so the alternatives analysis review. So obviously the purpose, is to improve safety and mobility by constructing this grade separation. So we had to go through and look at a total of 6 alternatives, evaluate all possible alternatives for the grade separation. And these consist of, Grand Avenue going over or under the railroad going over or under Grand Avenue, or a combination of the two, lowering and raising, either or. And we evaluated all 6 of those alternatives. And we went through and we did an alternatives analysis. And so the analysis included studying the impacts of each on the project area, and we developed scores. Scores were applied to those impacts. The highest score representing the alternative with the least amount of impact. The evaluation criteria was determined in consultation with the village, members of this group, and the project team. We looked at both quantitative and qualitative impacts to the project area. They were evaluated and measured. For qualitative impacts such as visual impact and community cohesion, values were applied to each major to represent major, moderate, or minimal impact. So of each of the 6 alternatives, they were awarded a score of 6, the least amount of impact, to 1, representing the greatest amount of impact. So shown on the bar chart here, alternative 2, which is the Grand Avenue underpass underneath the railroad, that one received the highest score. Okay, so, and then subsequent to that, we applied, the importance of the selected criteria was applied to these various scores. So we developed a weight that was determined for each criterion for this, and this was conducted via survey of the members from the CAG, the village, and the project team. So like, for example, property displacement was determined to have a more significant impact than like an impact to a minor side road. So we rated each criterion on a scale from 1, low importance, to 5, high importance. And then all these ratings were aggregated and applied to the scores for each category. And the weighted totals, again, are represented in this bar chart with, again, alternative 2, the Grand Avenue underpass, Grand Avenue under the railroad, receiving the highest score. So, based on all that, the top performing alternative is alternative 2, the Grand Avenue underpass, based on all the input we received from stakeholders, the public, the village, members of the CAG. So here is alternative 2 in a little more detail. Again, it entails lowering Grand Avenue underneath the railroad. The existing railroad profile would remain at its current elevation. A railroad bridge would be constructed, obviously, to carry the railroad over Grand Avenue in that improved condition. One significant result of that is the 76th Avenue profile would also need to be lower, because Grand Avenue is much lower now in the proposed condition. 76th Avenue would need to be modified from its intersection at Grand Avenue all the way to Conti Circle. So here's just there's the profile in simplified format here, showing Grand Avenue going underneath the railroad. There's a minimum vertical clearance of 14 feet 9 inches that would need to be provided per IDOT policy. With the top of the structure being approximately 27 feet 9 inches from the pavement to the top of the rail. So since our public meeting 2, as Ellie mentioned back in about a year ago, there have been some additional developments. We had additional coordination with Metra. So initially, when we evaluated alternative 2, we were just spanning the existing 3 railroad tracks with the structure. So through some additional coordination with Metra requested that we provide the railroad structure that would span the entire right of way. So basically, in conjunction with Metra's long-range plans, they could come back at some point in the future and put in an additional track or even 2 tracks, and there would be no impacts to the structure that would be constructed under this project. So we went and revised alternative 2 slightly to accommodate that. Also, Metra had committed $10 million in federal funds in order to do that towards the construction of this project. They're very supportive of the project, and they're going to continue to support the project. The one significant thing associated with that, as I mentioned, due to the lowering of Grand Avenue, it caused Grand Avenue to be lowered even a little bit more because of the longer structure. So then there were 76th Avenue had to be lowered a little bit more, and there was an additional impact to the Elms funeral home because of the profile. The impacts would just be so great to their parking. They would basically be left with no parking, even though the building itself would not need to be displaced. They wouldn't be able to operate a viable business there. So consequently, there was one additional displacement associated with that refined alternative to the underpass, the Elms funeral home. So kind of go through a few slides here of the funding, where we're at. Phase 1, we're currently in phase 1. We're anticipating completing this by the end of 2024. The phase 1 is fully funded. There's phase 2. So phase 2 is also fully funded through both non-federal and federally funded sources. IDOT, Cook County, and the Illinois Commerce Commission have participated in that. The land acquisition is partially funded through the ICC. We are anticipating getting some additional funding from IDOT through their Section 130 funding for the balance of the land acquisition. And of course, the big one is the phase 3. The majority of the cost is associated with phase 3, which is the actual construction. So the construction engineering, the phase 3 construction engineering, as well as the actual construction, is again partially funded through both federal and non-federal funding sources. There have been a number of federal grants available that we have applied for in the past. Unfortunately, we haven't been successful at getting into any of those grants to date. We believe that's due to the fact that, this project is still in phase 1. Generally, when funding is committed, you want to be much closer to the actual construction, but we are still continuing to pursue federal funding as those grants become available in the future. So that's a summary of everything. So what questions does everyone have? I'll try to answer those for you. Everyone thinks it's a good idea. We should start construction right away, right?
We should start construction after your plans.
Jokingly, you need to redo your logo.
The logo?
Do you get it? Because
Yeah.
it's showing the wrong alternative.
Oh,
So you need to reverse your.
yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. We got so consumed in evaluating all of these alternatives, we didn't know which one was going to be preferred, but yes. That's a very good point.
Be the only displacement?
Pardon me?
This whole funeral home be the only?
No, there are a total of 8 displacements. The funeral home, the one condo, the multi-story condo building.
First one when you come in.
Yeah, there's the gas station, the enterprise rent-a-car facility.
The other side.
On the west side, the daycare center, there's that Cherry's gaming facility, gaming cafe. There's a vacant storefront right now next to Cherry's.
Scott, why don't you go to the slide and show us?
Yeah. Go back to that.
I get ahead.
Or, no, not at all. So yeah, there's
So well, you're gonna have the two buildings that you come into the circle and then everything else to be west of the track.
right, so the condo building here, Elm's Funeral Home, and then there's a total of 6 that I mentioned over here.
Got it, okay.
Those are the ones that get displaced. There's some access. The A's represent access impacts. There's some access impacts, but those are the 8 buildings that will be displaced as a result of the construction of alternative 2.
What's been the reaction from the property owners being displaced generally?
So we have talked to the Elms Funeral Home. Again, no one wants to be displaced, but the owner understood the reason for the displacement. And we also did talk to the owner of the daycare facility, same thing. They understood, they were not overly irate. We did send letters to all of the affected displaced property owners. We did actually have a meeting right before the 4th of July here in this room with the condominium owners. And overall, I mean, I think things went fairly well. The other owners we did send letters to, but we didn't receive any calls or any feedback or any requests for any additional information from them. So we talked to 3 of the 8 that are going to be displaced to date.
You talk about walking and maybe cycling access under the railroad. Is there going to be sidewalks? How's the access to the station going to be affected?
Yeah, so yes, in accordance with IDOT's complete streets policy, there is a shared use path on one side and a sidewalk on the other side.
What side is the shared?
So we're on the
South side?
shared use on the south and sidewalk on the north, right? Yeah, and then the sidewalk, right? So that's in accordance with IDOT's policy. That has to be accommodated with the proposed improvement.
What about crossing Grand Avenue? There's been a lot of foot traffic, especially kids going to and from
Right.
school.
We did receive a comment at the previous public meeting about potentially, a pedestrian tunnel or something of that nature, but currently that is not in the plan for something of that nature. So it still would be, at grade crossing of Grand.
If you're making that structure wider, can you put a link between the village facilities and the station over there? On it, so
You mean as far as pedestrian crossing? Yes, it could be done. But again, where the concern is, it's just additional funding and probably be, add several $1 million to the project to accommodate that. And, we're short how much, Bill, at this point on the current improvements?
We do have something similar to that in Elmwood Park, where we have a railroad bridge over the Range Road.
right?
And the separate pedestrian multi-use path bridge right alongside it, so it's separate structures.
So it could be done. I mean, it's not that it can't be done, it's just the additional cost.
Yeah, so the designs, sounds like it's forward compatible, that it's like if that were to be pursued as a separate project.
Right,
The design doesn't prevent that from happening in the future.
right.
My concern would be literally hundreds of kids going across Grand Avenue every day
Right.
to go to the middle school and the high school. And many of them cross now either at some place where they shouldn't be crossing or at 76.
Right.
So if you can sharpen your pencils.
Wait, can they still cross at 76?
Yeah, you can still, right,
Still cross at 76.
right, they'll still be able to cross, right?
It would be no different. I mean, I agree it would be an improvement, but I don't think it would be any different.
Well, I didn't know if they're going to change in the grade there, if that's gonna.
No, they could, no, they could still cross there.
76, or they could go west of the.
It would be lower, but the intersection would
There's
be
still be a
maintained.
traffic light there.
Yeah, the intersection is maintained, it's just lower and it's in the proposed elevation is lower. But you're right, I mean, obviously, people tend to cross, well, especially children, wherever they feel like it's a good place to cross.
Cross on this side of the village hall.
Which they can still do.
So- So what's the vertical profile of that bikeway over pedestrian? Is the bikeway gonna be above the roadway?
Yes, slightly, right, it'll be
So-
curved, right?
So and by the time it gets to Signal, will it be like at the grade of the road or?
It'll be slightly above, because there'll be a curve there, it might be 1 foot higher.
So that's still a little bit of a concern then, because then if you're crossing there, then you're gonna go do what?
Well, at the crossing, there would have to be ADA ramps, at that for the actual crossing, they would have to conform to ADA. So it wouldn't, you'd have the ramp there to transition.
I'm not saying it's
Yeah.
there. It's still like.
Right, yeah, there's still a light
Signal
fixture,
intersection.
it's still signalized.
But from what I understand, well, the way these are typically done is that the bike ped grade is different than the road grade. So it's high, it's typically higher.
Correct,
But, yeah, so you have to make sure that when you cross the road, it's safe and accessible.
and it has to be accessible for someone in a wheelchair in order to be able to cross. So yes, the ADA ramps would need to be accommodated at the crossing. At the pedestrian crossing.
Yeah, I'll just, write that down as a concern.
Yeah, we're documenting, that's the purpose of this meeting, to document input. Tammy, do we have any questions from the online or?
They're not, but we can remind people online, they can unmute or raise their hands to ask questions at any time. We have 15 people online, so feel free to jump in.
Lots. So was the railroad crossing elimination program one of the fund sources that you had?
Yes, and we did not receive funding.
Have you talked?
We had a debrief with the DOT, US DOT,
Okay,
and we got input from them, and we applied that input to future submittals.
okay,
So yes, we did have a formal debrief with the US DOT.
all right. So I want to talk to you and also generally county staff, because there's concern about NEPA approvals for FRA funds versus federal highway funds that folks raised at the meeting we had out in Palatine the other day. So was it yesterday, day before yesterday? So that there, we need to get some bureaucratic ducks in a row.
Okay. Yes, that would be helpful, absolutely. Any questions? No, from anyone out there virtual?
Just out of curiosity, what was the number 2?
Number 2 is the underpass. That is the top performing alternative.
So that was number 1.
What's the second?
What was the second?
I think the hybrid. Yeah, number 6, which is the hybrid of raising the railroad and lowering Grand Avenue. Combination of the 2.
So still an underpass, just like a difference. in-
Correct, but not right. The elevation was less.
And then I think my last question, this particular railroad is a concern, we heard about the Grand Avenue crossing west of here, but also Franklin Park is working on a grade separation. We're doing a comprehensive plan in River Grove, and the grade crossings there have been raised as a concern. The Harlem Avenue crossing and those 2 crossings at River Road and Thatcher Cumberland are on our priority list. Harlem Avenue here is on our priority list. Is there anything, again, looking down the road decades, is there anything that building this project would do that would preclude future Harlem grade separation?
No,
Okay,
yeah,
okay,
would not preclude that.
great. Thanks.
All right, sure.
I got a quick question, real quick. Those tracks, are those CPs? Any specific rail tracks?
They're
Well, somebody owns them.
We only maintain them.
Do you really?
Yes. we do.
Right, okay, all right. I was just wondering about the freight trains and such.
CP dispatches.
Right,
Oh,
and they operate via trackage, but it's over our track.
okay, thank you. Thank you for clarifying that.
Okay, so Ellie, you want to take us through the next steps?
Yes. Last questions or comments from anybody online? Was there any other questions, comments, concerns?
No, and again, people can chat questions, they can unmute and ask questions, raise their hand, feel free,
Okay, all
I'm
right.
watching.
Well, I think it's a good sign that, we're out of questions. That means everybody's on board, everybody is ready for the next steps. So we are looking to hold a public hearing. Our target date is the spring of 2024. And we're looking to have that as a final opportunity for the public to comment on the top performing alternative. And as I mentioned before, the design team will submit that final approval. And hopefully we will be looking forward to more funding and then construction. So that really concludes our presentation today. Obviously, these are our timeline. We're looking at finalizing the concept design, supporting analysis, continuing coordination with you all, with everyone online, and obviously preparing the engineering and environmental reports, and then hosting that public hearing in the spring of 2024. And then we will look to complete phase 1 in December of 2024. So that completes our meeting for today. We're always accepting comments, concerns, questions, so feel free to send the email. Sorry, it's a little bit covered up right now, but it's info@grandgatewayep.com. And obviously the website is grandgatewayep.com. So feel free to always utilize those and send us your comments, or you can, I'm sure by now you have all of our emails as well. You can always send us emails. So Without further ado, if there's no more questions or comments, we'll let you guys go. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, yeah. So, right on, right? Yeah.